Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Jeffrey Burke, and for those of you tuning in for the first time, definitely welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here. If you've been following us, and listening for a while, you know that you're getting great information on this podcast. I'm bringing you the best minds in the industry, making sure that you have everything you need to make those very wise, healthy, and as well, maybe successful choices along the way. It takes a little work, but we're going to make sure we do that. I'm so happy to have my very, very dear friend, Ric Scalzo, back with me today. Hey, Ric, how are you?
Good morning, Jeff. How are you?
Wonderful. We're looking at the background. That is Costa Rica. And if you listen, you can hear the birds in the background. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, those are cicadas. It's cicada season here.
Okay.
So we have birds and cicadas, and there's a melody of beauty today.
Wonderful. If you're tuning in for the first time, you may not have heard the background, this extensive background that Ric has. And if you've been in the industry, you obviously know all of the wonderful things he has done. Ric began his journey into herbal and naturopathic medicine in 1980, studying naturopathic herbal medicine, eclectic herbal medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, and various diagnostic practices. He received a master's degree in herbal medicine from the School of Herbal Medicine and an honorary doctor of naturopathic medicine from Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine. Renowned for his innovations in herbal medicine and personal commitments to retaining herbal integrity, today Ric continues to innovate herbal remedies and is a leader in the movement to integrate regenerative agriculture into the world of herbal medicine. Amazing background, Ric. You've been around for a long time. You've done so much for this industry. And, anybody that's had any longevity in the industry knows the amazing strides that you've helped to take us to, where we are today.
Yeah, it's been a great journey for me. Almost 40 years now, Jeff. As you know, you learn a lot, right?
Yes.
During the process.
Well,
thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. I think today people are looking for answers. It's gotten very confusing. I think when we started really getting into computers and search engines and things like that, there was a great ease of quickness of information. But I think that double-edged sword also brought a lot of confusion. And I think that it's very easy to get confused. And then also you have to make sure that you're doing the research on the research that you're researching, because sometimes there's things that we pull up that are not always true. So we need to make sure that we have a platform where we can get the information, the honest to true information, to make a difference. And I don't think it could apply anything else in the world other than our health and nutrition, where we need to have the best information at our fingertips.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no better way to learn than from nature, and then you can validate it through science, and it's a beautiful marriage.
So today we're going to talk about regenerative agriculture, but we're also going to talk about organic agriculture principles. You and I have been around for a long time, and, I think I can kind of remember almost the time when organic actually started making its appearance on the scene, if you will. And it was like one of those things where we learned a lot about getting fruits and vegetables and crops that had no pesticides, no chemicals. There was a time when organic agriculture actually brought you a lot more nutritional value. We've seen a decline in some of the organic fields today where they're not getting the same amount of nutritional value. We're still getting no chemicals, no preservatives and pesticides and all that garbage, but we're not getting as much nutritional value. So here we are on the scene, and we're starting to hear about regenerative agriculture, and people want to know about the differences, and how do we benefit from regenerative agriculture, both as a people and a future people, as well as a planet.
So I want to share a story because it was very fascinating and very timely. I was just last evening came out. I was visiting a friend and came out on my way home, and I saw this trail of leafcutter ants. And so every single, you know, they go in long trails, and each of them are carrying a piece of leaf that they've just broken off. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to be doing a podcast tomorrow with Jeff. And what a better way to start talking about regenerative agriculture than to tell the story about the leafcutters, because they were the first regenerative farmers 50 million years ago.
Wow.
And, you know, not a whole lot of people know their story, but they were, they live by gathering pieces of leaves, and they bring them back to the nest where the queen and her family reside. And inside the nest are these other workers, other than the leaf harvesters. They have leaf cutters in the nest, and the leaf cutters take the leaf and they salivate on the leaf, and they excrete their feces on the leaf. And so, you know, what they're doing in effect is creating the environment for compost. And so the salivation and the poop from the leafcutter ants actually creates the formation of these fungal hyphae, these little single strand fungal organisms, which actually become the food for the queen, and for the queen's the larvae from the queen's eggs, and also for the, you know, the population within the nest. And so when this fungal matter, what it does is it decays the leaf that is, you know, brought into the nest, and it produces this amazing, very porous, very rich, very, you know, living soil. And I look at the nests from leafcutter ants. Sometimes they're very, very large, and I can see the most beautiful soil being produced. And this has been done for over 50 million years. And what's the foundation of it? The foundation is soil microorganisms that are, you know, Jeff, the foundation of both organic and regenerative agriculture is nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And these leafcutter ants are bringing the carbon into the nest. That's the leaf. They're adding the nitrogen. That's the saliva and the feces. And there's moisture inside the nest coming from the rainwater. And then there's obviously oxygen. So you have the four essential elements for creating life. And when you think about regenerative agriculture, you are creating life in the soil. Most of the soils around the world, especially if they're agrochemicalized, you know, farming, those soils are now dead. They don't offer much to the human body. So what we, you know, we're not just talking about the chemicals that's in the soil. We're talking about the vitality and the nutritional depletion that has occurred. And with regenerative farming, we're building all this back up. We're building the vitality, we're building the nutrition, and we're breeding life again.
You know, I heard a couple statistics just recently, and they say that we have about 60 years left of topsoil on our planet, and that our insect populations are down by 57% since the late 80s, and 40-some% of the bird populations have disappeared over the last 10 years, and they're pointing their finger 100% at pesticides and chemicals, damaging not only the system but the marine and the ecosystems as well. You know, you think we would get it by now, you know, because I know there are places around the world where they have outlawed a lot of their chemicals and their pesticides, but there's still plenty of places that are still using them in full force and have not embraced anything different than what they've known for the last couple decades.
We have to get it. And the reason why we must understand it and then apply it is because our own life depends upon it. Mm-hmm. You know, when you talk about agrochemical farming and how nutrient deficient our foods are, and then talk about regenerative farming. And our words are nutrient density. So we're building up the density of our nutrition again. And so that will take time to build up in the body, but we have to do it because it's a matter of our survival. You know, it's a matter of our building our immunity, sustaining our immunity. And you know, the environment's very complex today. It's got a lot of disruption that has occurred, and there'll be more to come. And we need to really accelerate the potentiality of our immunity to manage that disruption. And it all starts in the soil. That's my story. It starts in the soil, and it builds the density of nutrition in our plants and the phytochemicals for our well-being. And we've got to do it.
You know, every time I see pictures of the farm and I see people working on the farm, I see you walking through the farm and everything. It's just such a connection that you see. You see everyone down there. They're totally 100% connected to what they're doing and the soil, and it's just this bond. And I think that if we ever did have that bond, I don't think we have it on the planet in many places unless there's some place where they're actually embracing the soil. You know, they say that we borrow our soil and the health of our soil from our future, from our kids and our kids' kids. And I think that's true. And I think we need to start doing something because it's not just for this crop or next month's crop or next year's crop. It's for crops and everything down the road moving forward. And we have to start preparing for that. So I think it's essential to your point.
Yeah, and there's another thing that I really believe in. It's an unseen factor, and that is the consciousness of our workers. And when you're working diligently, and I watch the workers who are now processing fresh ginger in our plant, and they're cutting off the ends, the very fragile ends of the ginger. Their consciousness is projecting right into the plant. So they're awakening the plant with human consciousness. And I just love watching how they work so attentively. You know, there's not a lot of talking around back and forth. They just work attentively, projecting their consciousness, the purity of their awareness into their work. And what they're doing essentially is enlivening, these herbs with consciousness. And I think for me, that's something I've always paid attention to when I was in practice, how important it is to imbibe consciousness into the medicine for the patient. And that's what they're doing. They're imbibing consciousness into our herbs so that when we take them, they're alive and vital.
You talk a lot about living a regenerative life. And maybe if you could define that, because I know that if people would understand, they'll have an aha moment and they'll get it 100%. But people don't talk about it. We need to talk about it a lot more. It's just not a good idea. It's essential.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to understand that if we were granted 100 years in this life, how do we take and live it in the optimal way so that our body and mind remain healthy and our environment is benefited from the life that we are and the life that we are living? And so for me, a regenerative life is choosing to be in partnership with nature. And there are a lot of formative forces that we are subjected to.
Of course.
When the moment we wake, open our eyes, when we awake, we're subjected to the formative force of light created by the photonic energy of the sun. So that's a formative force of nature. And when we go to bed, we are influenced by the formative forces of the moon, which is a much quieter, much more nurturing, restorative type of energy. And so in nature, there is dynamism, Jeff. You see it all the time. And so how do we become partner with that dynamism? And I think it's about our routine that we choose, how to keep a healthy daily routine. What do we do when we wake up in the morning? Do we just lay in bed for a couple of hours and read a magazine? Or do we get up and exercise, drink fresh water, cleanse our body? Do we meditate? Do we journal? Things that are, adding value to our life. And then how do we engage in our day-to-day work? Are we choosing to do things that are purposeful, that are aligned with our life, with our intention? In Japan, they call that the ikigai. When you're living your own dharma, if you will, or you're living your life's purpose. And so, are we choosing to engage our energy in our life's purpose for this body, for this individual? What is my purpose in life this time around? And then, in terms of our afternoon and evening routine, do we eat a huge meal at 9 p.m. or do we kind of wind the day down starting at 6 p.m. as nature does? We see that all throughout nature, the winding down, the going to sleep of creation starting at around 6 p.m. when the sun is setting. Do we do these things that are in harmony with nature? Because if we do, we are contributing more and more to a regenerative process. And this is what I mean about a life regenerating. And then to take it even further in our behaviors, do we stay active? Do we move this body so that we can lubricate our joints and stretch our muscles? Do we remain connected with each other, or are we isolated? It's so important to have the proper social connections for a life regenerated. So these are just some things that I speak about that I think are so important today.
I think the average person today, not to stereotype, but I think people, most of their focus in our world today is stress based and deadline based, and we have so many things going on. And I think people feel that the tiny little bit of time they have, they may use however they need to wind down from the day. But it seems like all of a sudden they get to a point where they retire. And at this point in time, they want to start living and doing all the things that they didn't do before, but the body may not be cooperating at that point because they didn't plant seeds, they didn't sow the soil, they didn't really take care of things along the way. So now they're fighting against all the things they didn't do, as well as age and aging and the state of the planet. So it seems like the best thing we can do is make today the day when you start focusing more on this regenerative life, because you have to have some things in place. They say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the next best time is today. So I think that that's really important. So I think a lot of us just need to realize that we're in charge of the things we're doing and how we think and how we feel and how we appreciate and how we share gratitude and how we do all the things that we do. But we have to get started. It's not just a good idea. It's something that has its purpose, that we need to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about the role of the leafcutter ants in regenerative agriculture, and but there is something to take from this in terms of the whole process of the microorganisms. And we learn how valuable the role of these microorganisms are in life, not just this life, but all of life. And so we see in cultures that are traditionally healthy, we see how fermented foods have been adopted into their diet, which speak to the role of these microorganisms, the healthy microorganisms, being a part in creating a more vital food for us. So this is why in the Mediterranean diet and in certain Japanese foods, Japanese culture, you'll see a lot of fermented foods that guide people along their journey to a life regenerated. And I think this is another lesson that we must learn from the leafcutter ants. What they were creating was, a myriad, a whole mountain underneath the ground of fermentation of and how important that is to regenerate life.
I think I think if you're blessed to be able to have people in your world where the celebration of food and preparing food and sharing food with people that you know and you love, I think there is so much value to that. And I have friends that they make just an event out of cooking at their house. They have
All
people,
right.
everybody is in the kitchen, everybody is cutting, everybody is working together. The music is fantastic. It's a celebration. Then when they sit down, it's embracing, it's saying a prayer, it's looking at the colors and the beauty of the food, and then enjoying it, and then having time to talk about it after the meal and things like that. And I don't think we do that enough, because I don't think we celebrate that part, because most people are throwing things together, or they're getting something at a fast food restaurant on the way home, and they're eating half of it in the car in the paper bag. And I understand our lives are busy and pressed, but I think once in a while we need to really kind of appreciate the value of the sustenance that we're giving our body. And the healthier the sustenance, the healthier the food, the better the value.
And how good do you feel after an event like that,
Mm-hmm.
where there's a lot of sharing, beautiful music, beautiful compassion and gratitude and kindness being shared? How are those qualities, compassion, gratitude, and kindness, are powerful medicines.
Yes.
They too, those energies still do have the ability to reshape, restructure, reorganize our mind and body back into a state of wholeness. Can we practice them every day?
It's so different than what most people know. I had a very good friend that she's a twin, and she went to live in Greece for a year. She got there and found out that it was a half a mile walk to town. There were no fast food restaurants. She was very overweight, very unhealthy, but she had a deal where she could become an artist and stay there for a whole year and teach art. So she started walking to town back and forth every day. She said it was about killing her for the first week or two. And then she started loving it and going every day. And then she met this lady who started to teach her how to prepare food Mediterranean style. And she started preparing her food. And then she started having classes at her house on food preparation. And
Yeah,
she
you're
lost a lot of weight. She's vibrantly healthy and loving what she's doing. She changed everything. And if she'd stayed here, she probably never would have. So the environment, I think, is a factor as well, where you are.
yeah, yeah. So many things, and it's natural to live a life regenerated if you so choose. And we need to break old patterns. But for some of us, there will be, and perhaps most of us, there will be a need to supplement along the journey. And this is why I started Kokora, because we wanted to create the supportive role of herbs, and how they can help to stitch together the fabric of our wholeness while we do all of these other things. We started with these functional adaptogenic and super mushroom powders, and they're beautiful because you can just mix them in a smoothie, or mix them in water, or make a dish with them. But there's a nice way of getting super mushrooms and adaptogens into your diet, and soon we'll be bringing forth these beautiful regenerative capsules, which will add such a layer of whole plant potency to help in the process of a life regenerated.
So if someone was to ask you this question, which I think kind of alludes to the quality and the integrity of your mindset and what you're doing, what you've always done, if you're talking the health of the soil, the benefits of the health of the soil regeneratively and the health of the soil organically, it's different.
Yeah, I think just going back to where I started, um, I created an amazing farm in North Carolina,
Mhm.
and it was an organic farm, certified organic. And our practice was a little compost. We started out with a lot, but then, we had to discontinue the composting operation, and then we put organic fertilizers into the soil. We did cover cropping. We did crop rotation, and over the 20, 25 years, that I stewarded that farm, I saw a tremendous transformation in the soil. But one thing I didn't see is I would test the nutrient levels in the soil year over year, every year when we started. I didn't see the nutrient levels shift. Over 20 years, it remained constant. And I thought, wow, I'm doing so much organically to move the needle, but the needle isn't moving. And I thought when I became interested in regenerative farming, and creating the next step of tending to the soil food web, the microbiome of the soil, and really nurturing that by no-till practice and by adding, mountain microorganisms to the soil and so many other things we do. Then I started to see the needle shift. And we actually started to measure the life in the soil by looking at the individual microorganisms that were now in the soil that weren't in the soil when we were growing organically. And suddenly, it all clicked to me. It's these microorganisms which bring the nutrients into the plants, which make the nutrients available in the soil. And that's how we can benefit from it. So the missing link in organic farming for me was the soil food web, attending to what that meant.
Now, taking it a step further, enhancing that soil and the quality of the soil, we're at a place right now where a lot of talk is about carbon. And how does organic farming affect the carbon in the soil versus regenerative farming? There's a difference there as well.
There is a difference. In organic farming, you are not obligated to necessarily do no-till farming. That's a practice which is more talked about now in regenerative farming. But the more you have a cover of green on your soil year round, whether it be your crop or a cover crop or some sort of mulch or something like that, where your soil is protected from the elements, from the sun and from erosion and so forth. The more you protect your soil that way, then you're also have a side benefit of drawing down carbon. You talk about carbon, and so in organic farming, you're not obligated by practice to attend to carbon sequestration. With regenerative farming, it's a byproduct of the farming. So you are drawing down carbon at a fast rate when you're farming regeneratively, which is why I think, I've heard some stats. If every farmer who's growing now with agrochemicals would just switch to regenerative farming, we could draw down adequate carbon to stop and reverse climate change. So that's a powerful statement.
Very powerful. The interesting thing about people are asking questions about regenerative, as I travel, I'm hearing people ask more and more questions, and they're getting it. You're seeing the light bulb coming up and people are getting it. It just makes sense. And, most people will say comments like, we haven't been, and to use your word, and I love to reiterate the word, stewards. We have not been good stewards of the planet. And I think that we need to be better stewards of the planet. And, you see a lot of stuff going on with politics, and that people like to talk about things we should be doing and we could be doing. And all those words sound really good on paper, but unless you're applying them and actually moving it forward, it's not getting done. So the more people that come on board with the understanding of regenerative agriculture and living the regenerative life, a lot more people are going to start to show major interest. Would you talk about something, because we're talking about no-tilling, talk about the yeoman's plow. I love this. I love this thing. I love it. I have it in my PowerPoint. I talk about it.
Yeah, I wish your audience could see a picture of the shanks on a yeoman's plow. This is new for me. We just came across it. It's not new to agriculture. They've used it long ago. But a yeoman's plow is not a plow in the use sense of the word. It is an an instrument that you attach to your tractor, and it moves these shanks, which are about 24 inches, tall and about 1 inch wide. And there's several of these shanks on this implement, and it moves it through the soil, and opens up from the top of the soil, down 24 inches. It's opening up space, not turning it over, just opening up 1 inch wide with each shank. And while we're doing that, we're injecting the mountain microorganism solution, which is a fermented, liquid. It's like a composted tea of microorganisms made through a special preparation. We're injecting that right into those spaces.
I love
and
this.
we're feeding the soil at deep levels these organisms, which go to work, and they work quickly. They multiply quickly, and they regenerate the soil very beautifully. So I was just at the farm 2 days ago, and I was watching the yeoman plowing in our fields, watching the mountain microorganisms going into the spaces that were being opened. And I was telling, I was with somebody and showing and smiling and saying, this really works. This is how it needs to be done. This is regenerative farming. Those are my words. There's more to it, but this is regenerative farming. Because those yeoman plows, they are creating aeration. They're opening up spaces, which prevents erosion, water washing off the topsoil and washing off the top layer of the microbiome of the soil. It's creating, aeration for the organisms to thrive within the soil. It's creating aeration for your roots to go deep and gather more nutrients to grow a more robust and more nutritious plant. So it's an amazing tool.
Yes. And I love it. And I love talking about it because it's, people don't realize that on most farms, you get about 6 or 7 inches of nice soil, and then things are heavily compacted. And, almost like out here in the desert where I am, you go down 6 inches and you hit something called caliche, which is just like compacted chunks of hardness. So the roots will go down and then they'll go sideways because they can't go into the soil.
That's what happens.
This breaks up those compacted areas and brings water down and just helps, everything work better, and it gives a great root system. So, it's interesting. I mean, I find it pretty neat.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And when they grow sideways, they've stopped taking up nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking for it, right in their, the neighboring land right next to there,
Mm-hmm.
to where they've started to grow sideways. But they need to grow, some of our roots like ashwagandha, that in one season that produces a root almost 3 feet long. And if you have very, soils that's opened up with a yeoman's plow, it's going to grow really beautifully.
I love the story that you had shared with me, with the team actually, and you were talking about, your first growing of turmeric, you had a wonderful yield. It was wonderful, but once you applied the regenerative, the yield dramatically changed. So there is a factor, organic or certified organic, certified regenerative, where the yield is actually much better with regenerative.
Yeah, it is. And, in our case, we increased the biomass yield from, it was about 15,000 kilos per hectare to 80,000 kilos.
Incredible.
I also, Jeff, I'll tell you, we have a place in Costa Rica called Changana, where it's just like 3 meters of volcanic soil, that dark, black, porous soil. And so our contracted ginger growers grow ginger there, and they're starting to bring the ginger into our facilities. And we have had a couple of growers in the north, which is grown in soil that has a history of being much more compacted. And the ginger is, much more compacted. It's clustered tightly, but the ginger grown in the Changana volcanic soils, which are very porous, 3 meters deep,
Oh my
Those
goodness.
gingers, I know you can't see it on the screen here, but I would say they're a foot, foot and a half from one side to another. The roots have very large hands. The palms are nice and thick, and those ginger roots grow extremely potently in that kind of soil. And that's again the beauty of using nature's regenerative force to build this kind of soil.
Someone asked me the other day, they said, ask Rick this question. And I said, okay. They said, there are farms that use animals or livestock that eat weeds and things like that. And I said, yeah, that's still done out there. Ask him, does that have any place in regenerative agriculture?
Well, it does, and animal byproducts are part of regenerative agriculture as well. Um, I think you have to really understand how to manage. If you have a big
Yeah.
piece of land that's got cattle on it, cattle are great grazers and they produce great compost or great manure, but they also compact the soil.
Yes.
They're heavy and they're
Heavy.
compacting the soil. So if you're going to grow where you've had a history of cattle farming, you do need a yeoman's plow. Do need something to loosen up the soil and regenerate the soil. I don't know. We use chicken manure as one of our sources of nitrogen, and we also use fish manure. So we apply animal byproducts on our farm. We have a large composting facility, very large, and we're constantly making these long windrows of compost with chicken manure and when we can get it, fish manure.
Okay. One more question. These are coming from the field. So they talk about, rotating crops, which you do very intricately. The question is, on the off season, does it stay open and non-functioning, or is there another crop that's in there that keeps it green all year long or keeps something growing all year long?
Yeah, absolutely. We use two important crops. They're nitrogen fixing crops in the off season. One is mucuna,
Mhm.
and mucuna is a legume, and it grows a long vine, maybe 30 feet long. So it produces a tremendous amount of foliage of carbon, and the roots have these little nodules, and in their early stage of growth, these nodules actually um, will inject nitrogen into the soil in the form of ammonium nitrate. So we use mucuna, very, very good source for carbon in the off season. And then we use sun hemp, which is also down here called crotalaria. And we use that both as a cover crop in the off season and we use it as an intercrop, meaning that if we're growing beds of ginger, we'll also grow crotalaria in the same bed as an overstory in intercrop. And now with our passion flower, Jeff, we planted these pedo, uh, uh, trunks. We went out and harvested the trunks of pedo trees, which are very regenerative. And so the reason why we could harvest them and not worry about it is because they grow right back. And even the part we harvest, we plant it as posts in our beds, and it starts to grow branches.
Wow.
And so those branches are then used. We cut them and we mulch them, or chip them and mulch it, and use that as another source of nitrogen in our beds.
Wow.
So it's quite interesting how you can use vegetative material, not always needing animal material for your source of nitrogen.
The rainy season down there is about 8 or 9 months during the year.
Yeah, 7 or 8.
And then
Yeah,
is there obviously there is, but sporadic rain on the off months?
generally no.
Oh,
We're in the dry season now, which started end of December, and it will continue to end of April. And it will rain a little. We may get a light shower in the evenings on a few days, but for the most part, we're in dry season now.
Do they do you dig wells there to get water? Where does the water come from down there?
We even though we have a beautiful river next to our property, we don't take water from the river. We actually have, I think we have 4 or 5 wells on our property that we've dug, and we take water from our well system.
Is salt water ever used?
No,
Okay.
we never use salt water.
Okay.
We use the only thing we do to our well water is transform it into fermented mountain microorganisms, which is like a fermented tea, and then we take worm castings and we make a tea from worm manure, and we then apply that. So those are the only two ways we change water in order to apply it onto the farm.
You know, there's so much involved in this, you know, and I've been blessed to work with you. And I mean, as long as I've been around, I mean, I'm learning things that I had no idea I didn't know. And, but I'm loving it because this is something that, you know, at my stage in this industry, as well as my age as well, it's allowing me to sink my teeth into something that I think is important and necessary, and being able to spread the word and, you know, put this information out so people can learn from it. It's a blessing.
You know, I like the fact that you're putting some emphasis in our conversations about the soil and the regenerative aspect of soil, because when we talk about Kokora, and as you know, the product line is evolving now, but when we talk about Kokora, it's all emerging from what we're doing now in the soil, and how we're creating a line of products that are truly regenerative. And you know, when we consume these herbs grown in regenerative soil, we stand a better opportunity of restructuring our own microbiome of our gut just by consuming the herbs grown in regenerative soil. So the story continues to be told, not just at the level of the farming, but at the level of our consumption and our participation in using some of these dietary supplements.
You know, you use the term, and I love it, front loading. And I think front loading is a very important term. And I know this has been your philosophy for a long time, but it could never be more valuable than today in the state of affairs we live in. We live in a very impatient world. And people today, they don't wait long enough for results. They want instantaneous things to happen overnight. They want changes by Friday. And what happens is people don't see these sometimes ridiculous things they've set for themselves. But the one thing I love about your philosophy is make products that are not only wonderfully healthy and pure and beneficial and all these wonderful things, but that are potent, that are bringing great quality of nutrition so that people are able to experience the benefits maybe faster, so that maybe it will help them deal better with their impatience. So that's huge.
They're not only potent, they are potent. They're potent. Most of our regenerative products, I like to say, are triple concentrated. And what I mean by that is they're concentrated through the regenerative farming, where we've seen nutrient densities increase 5-fold just in farming. Then they're concentrated in the liquid extraction phase, where the nutrient density can increase 5 to 8-fold. Then they're finally concentrated in the freeze drying phase, where the nutrient density increases another 4-fold beyond extraction. So triple concentrated is a process that allows us to really get to a potency, but a whole plant potency, meaning the totality of the wisdom of nature is left intact. And so when you talk about getting a result, you know, it's the potency, it's the delivery system, it's the way we have extracted and freeze dried, you know, so all of the herbs are really very available to the cells in the body.
Wow. I think people are going to absolutely enjoy using these products. And the people that I know that are already experiencing the adaptogenic powders are loving them because they're having such a creativity and finding all these new ways to use them. So I think it's going to be, I think the capsules are just going to take it to the next level.
Yeah. So the brand is Kokora.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, what's available is the functional adaptogen and super mushroom powders. And in the spring, later in the spring, will be our line of mushroom products and single herbs and formulas, all emerging under the Kokora brand for consumers to search for. And they can look on our website, kokoralife.com, and learn all about it.
And I will say, glass bottles, vegan capsules, and no synthetic additives, and none of that stuff that people are trying to get away from. Thank goodness for that.
And no excipients or fillers or binders or anything like that, Jeff.
Oh, it's so exciting. Thank you so much. This is, look at me. I just smile all the time. I love this because it's a mission, and I'm actually on the mission and part of it. It makes me feel good. Would you leave everyone with one of your wonderful thoughts of the day?
I mean, as I always do, I think, it's a visionary thought about how we can co-participate in a life regenerated. That's the theme of today's conversation. How can we co-participate? And what do we do? How do we set our life in motion? And maybe look at it in terms of little chunks of time. What do we do from 5 to 9? We're so concerned right now about what we do from 9 to 5. What do we do from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. before we start the 9 to 5? And how do we get our life regenerated in those first few hours of our day with a healthy daily routine? So that's a good place to start, building a life regenerated. Think about a healthy morning routine that can enliven and set our physiology back into that regenerative path.
I love it. Ric, thank you for being here today. Always
You're
a pleasure
welcome.
to have you here.
It's
I
a
want to
joy.
thank everybody for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. I know you did. Make sure to bring all your friends. Go to my webpage, drjeffreyburke.com. Remember to tap on the Honest Health logo. It'll take you to Spotify so that you can listen to the shows anywhere. And this is one you're going to want to have your friends listen to. All the shows that I've done with Ric are they're really putting together the information. You can follow the journey as we're on the journey as well. And remember, tap on the YouTube. You can watch the interview one way or another. But thank you for taking the time to be here. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Be well, and God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.